Hi everyone, welcome to FrankensteinsFabrics. Just a little voiceover here to cover a couple things. While I was filming this, I did have a migraine and I really did stuff up the measurements, so please follow what I'm physically doing in the video, but follow the measurements in the instructions. I also apologise for all of the traffic noise that is going on in this video. Even though there was no construction, there was everybody driving past my house all the time. And also, if you notice in the video in a few spots, I do tend to pause and hesitate a few times when I'm speaking. That's because with my migraine, one of the auras I go through is called aphasia, and it causes me to forget words or speak slowly because my brain's struggling to format the sentence that I'm thinking of. So thank you very much for bearing with me with all of this. We've finally got to the last block video, and here we go with November's block, our flying geese one. Please enjoy, and I will catch you on the other side.
Hello everyone, and welcome to FrankensteinsFabrics Mystery Block 12, November's block, which is our flying geese. Now, I know this block has taken a long time to come to you guys, but it has been one of those ones that just, it didn't happen the way I wanted it to, and then we had some footage problems with the audio dropping out, and I didn't want to record a voiceover for that video because a lot of the way that I talk to you as I'm showing you these projects, these blocks and bits and pieces, is off the cuff, and so trying to fill gaps of weird spacing and things like that, it doesn't work as well, so I don't bother. So we're going to be doing flying geese. Now what I'm doing is I have picked 3 colors for this one because what I actually want is an odd piece, and now that'll make sense when you start to see it, but so what I have picked is my 2 oranges and my white. Now I'll explain more about the measurements in a moment, but I'm doing the three colors for a reason. If you want to choose 2 colors and just have your background and your goose fabric, that's fine. You can mix and match, and there are some half square triangles that are already in your scraps if you want to chop them up and put them together as one goose unit, so we can look at that as well. But for now, I will flip the camera around and I will start to talk to you about what we're doing with the flying geese for November's block. Okay, so here I have my 3 fabrics. I have my main square and my 4 small squares, and what I'm going to show you is that normally with your flying geese units there is very specific measurements. There's charts all over the internet that tell you very specific measurements for your flying geese. Now, the issue that I have with those is that for this block there isn't a measurement that finishes at 12.5 inches because we need our raw edge block. Everything finishes at 12, so I've had to fiddle with the measurements slightly. So what we're looking at is an 8.25 inch square and 4.5 inch squares. Now the reason why it's that way is because the bias angles that we have they lose some. When you're making triangles, you lose some. So what's going to happen is that we're actually making our squares a lot bigger than we need to because we are doing a trim back, because I want to get the exact measurement that I want for these flying geese. So same as your other half square triangle. I apologize for the humidity. That pen's not going to work in here. I'll just get a pencil. So what's going to happen is that you want your block size to be very specific. So what's happening is that by cutting it back to the size we want, where we've got a bit more control. So you draw your diagonal marking on all of your squares. Now if you have a print, remember, draw on the wrong side of your fabric. It's just very humid in here today, so obviously my friction pen is not going to work because it's too hot for the ink to settle. Okay, so what we have now is our 5 pieces of fabric set up. And what I want to do here is I want to join 1 and 1, and I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam down either side. I'm then going to cut on that drawn line and separate them and press the seams, and then I will be working on the opposite way. So I'll set up the machine, I'll do that, and then we will come back. Okay, so we're all set up here. The usual suspects on the machine: white Aurifil Universal 8012 Schmetz sewing needle, 1/4 inch foot, and I have white thread on so that you can see on film, but if you are matching your fabrics, please coordinate as you need to. So line everything up, pin if you need to, please remember that. Now just sew down the 1/4 inch. Just trim off those extra threads at the start and turn it around and do the other side. Now, you can cut this apart with your rotary cutter, but I just prefer to do it with scissors because it's a lot faster. So now you have 2 pieces that basically kind of looks like a fox's head and its ears. So what you want to do now is press the seams. You can press in either direction, it is totally up to you. And then we will take our next square and pop it on there and repeat the process. So I will just iron these and I will be right back. Okay, so place your square on the diagonal and repeat the process. You can chain piece this if you like, but it's up to you. So grab your next one, line up the diagonals. Now I prefer to sew them on from this side first rather than this top side. It's just personal preference. There's not really any reason why I do it. Okay, so then once again cut apart, and you will find that that seam is quite firm, so when you're cutting with scissors just take that into consideration, and just trim away the extra threads. Okay, so now we have 4 geese units that need pressing. So press those, and then we will go over to the cutting table and we will trim them to the correct size. Okay, so we're back here at our cutting table. You don't need your long ruler, you just need something smallish. So depending on what rulers you've got and what mat you want to use for cutting, You can use your rotating cutting mat for this one if you want to. I'm not going to, but it's an option if you want to. And the reason being is because I'm going to be using a bigger ruler. But if you're using some of the smaller rulers, by all means use your rotating mat. So now what we're doing is we're going to be trimming these to a smaller size. And that smaller size is now 6.5 by 3.5. Now, I know that seems a bit weird making such a big square to sort of overcompensate for, but I'll show you why. This here is at 7.25 by 4. And that's rough. I'm not lining that up completely straight. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that this point gets a proper 1/4 inch seam. So that's where my focus is at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this and I'm going to line up a 1/4 inch and just see what I've got to deal with here. So at the moment I'm sort of looking at about 3/8, maybe a fraction more. It's not 100% straight. So what I want to do is I want to take off a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to find a little line on the ruler that's my horizontal that I'm going to line up with the very point of my goose. Then I'm going to find some other lines that are relatively straight. So I'm going to look down here. I'll move that along so you can see this. So I'm going to look down at the bottom and I'm going to say, okay, so my 9-inch line, it's looking fairly straight there, and the 1.5 roughly there. But what I'm focusing on is this line here and the 1/4 inch marking where that line is so that I can trim. So I'm going to trim. And I'm taking that piece off there. Now I know that my measurement is 3.5, so I can come back to here and put my 3.5 on here and take this off. Now, these ones that I've fiddled around with earlier, you can start to see how much I'm going to take off here. So there's a big bit at the top and the bottom on all 4 sides actually. But that's the beauty of doing a size larger, so you can trim back to the accuracy that you are looking for. So my 3.5, and you'll see here 3.5, and I'm going to take off the bottom of that. Now you can see now that the dimensions are way out of whack for where that 1/4 inch seam should sit for these sections here. Now because I'm doing 6.5 for this width here, I'll just show you on this one. You can see here that I'm going to lose a chunk off either side. But what I want to do is I still want to make sure that this is the center. So 6.5 in half is 3 1/8. So what I want to do is, and that's why I like this ruler in particular, the markings are quite visible with the fluoro. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 3 1/8 measurement. Actually, I might pull it down this way so I can see this bit. So 3 1/8 on my point line gives me from this marking here to this edge. So then if I count full 3, 1, 2, 3, and the 8th to get to my 6.25, I can see that I'm going to cut off about 1/2 inch on that side, and it's roughly 1/2 inch on the other side. So it's still in the middle. So that's what I'm looking at. And if I look here, I can see that that's pretty much on par with the previous blocks I've cut. Now, I made a full block in the other video and I've unpicked it and fiddled around with it and tweaked the measurements and all sorts of things. So that's why I have these extras. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we're on our 3 1/8. Line up a straight line on our 3 1/2. Make sure it's straight. And trim off the excess. Now at this stage you could go your 6 1/2 and your 3 1/2 and check it all. And I'm just checking with my previous block and it looks good. So trim down all your blocks and then we'll come back for layout. Okay, so now we have all of our blocks cut, our units cut. You can see what I've got here is my 2 white ones that I wanted separate to everything else. So what I want to do now is I want to lay out my blocks in a pattern that I want my whole thing to go into. So I'm reusing some of my previously cut ones, so I apologize if there's fluff and whatever on them. So you can treat this block as a directional one if you wanted to. Don't necessarily have to use directional prints because it's going to be difficult to fiddle around with them and get them in the right direction. But if you want to play around with your direction on your layout, this is where you can play. So I really like how this looks, but I'm actually thinking that I might want the white one not at the bottom. I'm going to pop it up 1 row. Now the other options you can do too for rotation, you can do your blocks with different directions. So you can treat them like arrows essentially, so up and down and left and right. You can also do them in opposites. So you could have here the background, the goose fabric, making a secondary pattern in the center here by joining them back to back. There's a lot of things you can do like that. So have a play with your layout. Don't stress too much about it. So I'm going to do this layout here. So what I want you to do is I want you to take each pair of geese and join them together. And then we're going to join, actually no, we won't do that. We'll join them in a row of 4. It's more efficient this way. So join them in pairs along a length. And then we'll join a set of pairs to each other, and then we'll join down the middle. So we'll go back to the machine and we'll come back. We have our fabrics here ready to join up in the last section here. So because I'm doing mine as a vertical, I'm going to be joining my background fabric to the longer edge of my goose fabric. So flip one over, pin if you need to, and we want a scant 1/4 inch seam. So because I fiddled with the measurements on this, it's not like super 100%. So if we give our scant 1/4 inch, it just gives us that little bit more to play with. So I'm going up to 4.5 on my machine. My usual's 3.5, so I've given it a bit more. So just go slowly. You're hitting that point. Now you can chain piece this, but I just want to show you something. What you want to hit is this point where the top of the goose is, so that when we flip it over, that point is there. Okay? So do that to all 4 sets. So remember that my white one is going into the second row, so I'm going to join it here, but I want to actually see the hit point on this. So I'm going to join it this way. So I've hit that point again, and my point is there. Now I can take these two together and I'm going to join them this way. And I'm going to check that hip point again. Okay, so there we have our 4. So this is the right hand side because my white was going into the center. So now I'm going to do the same again, but for the other side, and then I will press the seams. So line it up. Check my points. Line it up. Now I know that flying geese are not everybody's favourite block. Now if you decide you don't want to do this one, what you can do is if you go back to the heart block and the leftover cuts that we had from that one from the bottom part of the heart, so the 6.5 inch square angle part from the bottom of the block, you can take those and you can make a handful of those. I think it'll end up being 4, and you can make a half square triangle block. Now it's personal preference. I know flying geese are not everybody's favorite. The maths on them drives everybody crazy. So feel free to change. You'll still get a half triangle looking block. So we have a left side and a right side. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the seams. Now I'm going to press the seams in one direction on one side, so up, and then down on the other. And then I will come back and join the center seam. Okay, so seams in 2 different directions. Remember, we talk about this all the time of abutting the seams. Now this is the only time where I will use pins because there's too many things that need controlling. So seam to the right, seam to the left, pinch between my finger and thumb and wait till the seams lock into position and pin. Repeat for all of them, and if you feel you need an extra pin here or there to hold things in place, say this end bit here, you can do that, but otherwise do 3 pins should be sufficient. Now remember that you've got seams going down and seams going up, so the best option is to have the seams going down on the bottom plate of your machine so that you don't have to worry about them, and the seams going up you can control from the top of the machine. So slowly until you get to the first pin, stitch so that you've secured the flap of the seam down, remove the pin, do not sew over the pins. if you need an extra set of fingertips, Tailor's All can also help you with these. Okay, trim away any excess threads. Alrighty, open it up and check. Now we have very nice points. We've lost a little bit on that one, but that's not too bad. So we press the seam. Now I'm going to press this center seam open just because I'd like it to be a bit flatter than it is, and because I've got the white there in the center, I would matching shadows rather than one shadow on one side. Now, unfortunately with this block, there's not as much wiggle room when it comes to the fudging of your sizes. So if you find this one a bit tricky to get your 12.5 exact, just fiddle with it a fraction. It just means you might lose a point here or there. So now we'll go over to the cutting mat and finish off. So Nimbus has decided to join us for this last bit, but he can hold this for us. So there is our flying geese block, all done. So pop your label on it and pop it into your storage container, and then we will come back to it in a little while and finish off our assembly. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this block. Thank you for your patience in getting through all 12 blocks, and I will see you next time when we are ready to start joining. Bye for now.